Good morning. Today is the first day of June, and our Zoom guests for our Independent Curators International interviews today is Salwa Aleryani and Matheus Rocha-Pita, who created a really beautiful conversation on Topstrasse for Die Balkone. It will be really also we are very happy to have this conversation, and with also a view back over a month now, and now that also the quarantine is slowly opening and the social life is starting, but we are also still with our experience, and it will be really very important for us to have a look at it also from this distance. So thank you, Salwa. Thank you, Matheus, for accepting our invitation to join this interview and make time for us on this beautiful Monday holiday morning.
Thanks. I maybe can just add that what was really particularly touching in your installation or your two works for Die Balkone was the fact that first we wrote to both of you, I think separately, but then Matheus wrote that you actually don't have a front window or front balcony, and somehow it became like a neighbor's collaboration, that one neighbor came to another neighbor and it created a polyphony of two voices, but yet both works have beautifully kind of complemented each other. So because Die Balkone was also, of course, about art, pandemic, but also neighborhood. So that's one thing I guess we would like to talk to you about, like what it is to be a neighbor also through art. And maybe we can do that while showing some pictures of your work.
While showing some pictures, exactly.
Like a little guided dialogue with you about this.
Let me do that. And do you see it all right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So like Joanna was saying, when you guys invited me, I was like really happy on one hand, because I was always looking at my window during the first 2 weeks of the quarantine. And then I proposed to Salwa, and she immediately accepted to share her window. But the really beautiful thing as well, because we were neighbors before 4 years ago, because we met when we were doing the botanic residency. And so it's a sort of nomadic neighborhood, which was really, really nice. And I thought, at least for me, I have this very strong feeling that everything happened very smoothly and I think mostly because of this intimacy.
Maybe it would be nice to mention a little bit about the background of this conversation, where the gestures are coming from for you.
Yeah, maybe Matheus was saying that it's kind of our second occasion to be neighbors. Before we were neighbors at Botanian. And yeah, I think like he said, in terms of that, the sort of the invitation or the prompt came at this time where things were relatively quiet in comparison to now. So it was kind of a nice literally invitation to meet, whether it's virtually or not. And I think that was also a way to connect our distances in a way, that we are neighbors, but also over those days we were not meeting, but that became a really nice moment to sort of have a dialogue, have a conversation about that.
And Matheus, you actually you came over to Salwa for a window, but at the end you didn't use the window, but went outside.
Yes,
and built something. Can you tell us?
It's weird because I'm actually not exactly living in Berlin, so it's a very temporary situation that was extended because of the pandemic. The first time we visited, I saw the window, and so the window was somewhat too high for what I was thinking, because that's maybe it's something also from Salwa's work. Like we have very different works, but at one point I think that we share this. We have a lot of intimacy, like we demand intimacy from the viewer. So usually my pieces, you have to have a close look, and it's not something that you see from far. It just came to my mind to make this portable window, which I think also like reflect my condition, because since I don't have like a fixed home at the moment, like my window is also like traveling in a way, like and also this cardboard box, I just brought it home like 3 days before the invitations. Everything like fitted in a very like spontaneous and smooth way.
And you said also that that it also refers to a children's song.
Oh yes, there's this song in Brazil which is like really beautiful. It's called "The Very Funny House." It talks about a house that has no door, no window, no ceiling. It starts describing the very lovely, like the song like says it like it's a very nice house, but it's a house that does not exist. Mm. I only noticed that song is could be very sad or politically charged when I became an adult. So yes, when I did this window, like it immediately reminded me of this song, which is like every Brazilian kid knows. It's a very nice song.
It's beautiful because it's also like this house without windows, without ceilings, without like kind of walls, is actually also talking about like all those kids in a way, like kind of they take all of those communities.
Yes.
Living in non-conventional spaces and non-white spaces, like in the forests, like among their communities. So, because it is also, these communities are very widely spread in Brazil, right?
Yes, I also think like in a very like more abstract way, it's also about living about home, like outside of the idea of privacy, or like, because we have this very like Western idea of what home is, being like a nuclear family, private property, and so on. So it also speaks about an idea of home which is somewhat free from that more standard idea, a very like historically recent idea of what a home is. Mm.
Yeah, I think also what I like about it is that it has this other sort of, that it blends into it kind of camouflages along the lines of sort of these giveaway boxes that are often outside of like at the edges of streets in Berlin, and you sometimes have these kind of impromptu sculpture-like situations that happen. And I think that's, I mean, this is maybe something that what you were saying earlier, that we have in common, that we demand kind of intimacy with the work, or to come closely to it. But to me, that also has something to do with that the work blends into the environment in this kind of subtle way, where you could identify it as an artwork, but you also don't have to. Mm-hmm. And I think that was also the interesting thing of watching sort of passerbys, like, because the box is sort of treated with care, and you have this kind of curtain, and you sort of come close and you don't know if there's something behind it, if it's a giveaway, if somebody would take it, or I think that this kind of ambiguity plays into some of the ideas of what this is, and also what a window into something is.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true. It makes from the architecture of the box, which is usually laying on the street, it puts it up somehow, gives it another dimension, and maybe another agency makes it into a house out of the sudden. Right?
Yeah, but also like the curtain, I realized with the public saying they would think there was something behind the curtain to give, or so the curtain also
Or a puppet show.
Yeah,
You're
introduced
part of a stage that opened.
Yeah, it also introduced that sense of like suspense of waiting, or there was some there was this effect of something's going to happen here.
What I also like really, for me, the kind of a very strong is like that it's turned in the end like to a facade conversation. So it was using the building like kind of facade as a large setting to create this conversation, and this these two gestures, very intimate, different in their abstraction, but dreaming of a similar lost time and lost space in a way. And then the facade then becomes like becomes like this larger background for the coming public, or like for any passerby to look at the detail, or like try to notice this detail that's actually very intimate but very abstract at the same time. But Salwa, then would you relate, because I kind of think that this is really a piece about like a time inside time and a place inside place, like that we imagine. For me, like your conversation is really about that that different layer of time and space that that in a way we sort of lost, especially in this period, feeling the lockdown, feeling like the sense of time collapsed, the sense of space, or like kind of the boundaries around the space sort of collapsed. So can you really like, can you a little bit like kind of talk about your relationship with the abacus, with the time, with the how you kind of work with time in your installations in general?
Mm-hmm. Do you have, I don't know if you have a close-up of the...
I have, I'm coming to the close-up.
Because I wanted to say that, I mean, one of the sort of more, I don't know, call it organic or spontaneous things that I felt with the two works afterwards is that I started to see this kind of abacus thread that it kind of made me think of these older like curtain cords, and that became another association maybe between time and space, if you would say, because you know at the end of every day you're pulling the curtain down. At the beginning of every day, you're sort of pulling the curtain up, and you have this kind of repetitive motion. And in this case, the to me, like you said, that I sort of have played around with the abacus as an object, as a gesture in different works. And here it became kind of maybe a bit more literal, because, like you said, the sort of concept of time had collapsed then, and or there was that sense that time doesn't exist, or feels different, or and then the gesture sort of having this rope coming from the window down to the street was a bit like counting, I don't know, the moments, the hours, the days through each individual sort of bead that falls down the thread. And in a way it became also a way of counting, like you said, because of the extension of the rope, that the movement is, you know, much broader or longer than you would have in a smaller object.
Yes.
But it also felt like it was kind of literally measuring the building, or taking the measurement of my distance of the window to the ground as a like notation, or as a way to count the passing of time.
I mean, of course, for me it has like a kind of a really very strong childhood connotation from my from family that my grandfather always has. I mean, and he still does actually. He has one of these tespih, the rosary, and this is like a kind of a regular hand play for especially associated with masculinity and like manhood, of course, in Turkey, that what also is about like the kind of patience, it's like kind of and like more than it even became a sort of a secular symbol. It kind of turned out to be a bit less religious even, and more about like kind of the passing time and like and being patient, in life in a way. So I had directly these connotations, like when I was looking at this beautiful, for me, tespih, like measuring time, or like kind of measuring the ability to patience in this particular period.
Yeah, that's kind of like there was I think Matheus and I were like, as I was testing like different possibilities of how to place it, that there was a question of should it be a loop or not, and that's the thing about like the maslaha in Arabic, is that it's a loop also.
That's
and
true.
Kind of going through, and then in this case, what changes that you have like sort of an abrupt stop that like sort of halts these counts at the end of the building.
I just wanted to make one comment about the passing of time, because on one hand it calculates time, but on the other hand it calculates kind of no time, because very often people who do this, they are in the state of the same afternoon, the same evening, the sameness of the distance from one day to another. And the pandemic maybe made us kind of co-feel, all of us very busy people probably otherwise, somehow to have this feeling that, the distance from one day to another is the same as the distance from 1 week, from one day to in 10 days from now, that the distances between days have changed so much. And that work was also very much for me about this losing track of how to measure days.
It's true, like I had this feeling during the quarantine that all the memory of the days were amassing in this very same day. As we're like living like in a loop, but in a way it was more comforting than it was comforting sense that I was living the same day. I wasn't feeling at all claustrophobic within that that very same day. It was more a comforting
yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Because it had its own ritual also, no? Like that, all the rituals that we were also making, even like kind of, because we had to be, in a way, we had to create our rituals to be able to like kind of take the time, or like take the day and live in the day as it is.
Do we have some more pictures from the other side of the installation?
This is more like kind of this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is something that I wanted to share also. Is this kind of regular, is a regular Die Balkone audience image, like trying to understand like the map and where the works are, and like kind of see what it is. So this is a really beautiful. This is a really beautiful image in a way, like from the window, from positioning, like.
And also from the position of the artist, because we
exactly from the position of the artist.
Yeah, we usually look at art and artist window, and here it's like from the artist window. That's the famous window we always spoke so much about. Here it is. I'm also curious in this passage from being a guest in Berlin for both of you, and then for Salwa somehow becoming a Berliner, and for you, Matheus, I guess in and out. I don't know what you suggested. So could you talk a little bit about this? Because of course Die Balkone was also so much about one district of Berlin where we live, Prenzlauer Berg. Why did you decide actually to stay in Berlin, and how is it?
Is that, should I answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, in talking about neighborhoods, it's I don't know if I sort of was mostly in the neighborhood of Bethanien, and then like Prenzlauer Berg is the second neighborhood that I sort of got to know or and it was kind of a big jump, at least at first, or that's maybe in relation to some of the thoughts around like what what Berlin feels like after 5 years since Battalion. And so I feel that yeah, I mean, being there for a year, like I felt that, at least for me, I felt that Berlin had a lot of sort of feeling of maybe promise is not the like exact word, but for lack of a better word, that I felt that I arrived also at the time that a lot of other friends and colleagues and fellow artists arrived, which was around 2014-15. And I think I don't have a memory or knowledge of Berlin before, so I can't say what it was like before. But I feel that actually those years were a turning point, or the beginning years were a turning point, because Berlin seemed to become more diverse. There were a lot of communities that were coming together, and it felt that I had moved actually along with a lot of my friends or contacts or communities. And it was funny because somebody had asked me if I had the chance to go back to some closer art communities geographically, like in Cairo or in Beirut, and then I said, like, actually all of them are here or most of them are here. So I think that was kind of a reason. I mean, besides the sort of larger sort of Battalion family, including like Matheus coming in and out, and 2-3 other friends, that I felt like I had a community, and that was part of the reason of sort of wanting to stay, or feeling that this is a nice moment to be here.
And for you, Matheus?
Yeah, I just remember that today is I made 6 months in Berlin. I came to do a show in Hamburg. That the show ended yesterday, and I was supposed to be back in Brazil like in a week, but I was supposed to do something in the meantime in Belgium. Yeah, I was caught in by chance. I was here, like, and everything was canceled, both my works in Brazil and here. So, and I said to myself, no, it's the best thing to do is to stay here in Berlin. And now that, like, I realize it's, you know, the half year birthday, I'm like comparing with the Battalion thing, which was like 1 year. I'm already thinking, okay, this is serious.
It's like permanent temporarity.
Yeah, it was nice because as Salwa was saying, like, we were like in Kreuzberg around Battalion, and this is a very different neighborhood. And in a sense, this 6 months that I was here, it was like a relearning what Berlin is.
Maybe we can also connect to this south to south conversation. In a way, for me, this is. As you both know, this is something very important for my work, like to also to develop, or like kind of to be part of like kind of south to south conversation, or like also it's because I don't really see it as directly related with a geographical location, but the way it was also that kind of happening here in the context of our project in Prenzlauberg in Berlin. Was something very important, and also like to us. Can you talk a little bit about that particular public-private experiences that you are coming from, or have these experiences in a way informed your work or the way you understand your artistic practice?
Yeah, I could maybe take it from this image that you have now on the screen. Maybe I would start from there. I mean, for me, sort of the let's say socio-political aspects in my work are rooted in infrastructure or in space. And so for like in some earlier works, I was very interested in this kind of divide from a very binary. Now, in retrospect, looking back at those works, I feel that I was looking at it in a very binary way, and I think that had its reasons. You know, that in different like sort of contexts, the divide between the private and public is sometimes stronger than others, whether it's because of importance of privacy, of how street dynamics operate, how loud the city is versus these kinds of different things, I think, play into what sort of a domestic or private space represents. If it's a sort of a quiet in relationship to a sort of a louder outside, or if it's actually more open towards outside because the outside is also more, let's say, welcoming. And these have different sort of political reasons that come with that. And I think that one of the things for me sort of that popped up in the few days that we were working together for this work was that and also during the quarantine, is that it's sort of slowly you have these like flashbacks of like different domestic spaces that you occupied throughout your life, and then whether those were places that you were alone or with multiple people, and these different kind of, you start to kind of think of your let's say domestic geographies that you've experienced. And one of the things that occurred to me was sort of the view from my window in my room in Sana'a. And so I thought that because this is also like, that was the sticker that's on this window is kind of I thought about overlapping them together just as a way. To me, it was more, I mean, this is why it's also facing inside and not outside. So I was actually the audience for this, especially at the time that you know, we weren't like we were with social distancing and we weren't having any guests or so. And so I actually made this work for me, if that makes sense. And because I wanted to see those two images, let's say, layered over each other as a way to think about that, because I remember that I spent a lot of time working and looking out of that window, and I felt that that was sort of a way to reconnect, to reflect, maybe also on what Matheus was talking about too, like the different experiences in which this pandemic is affecting different countries and things like that, and that this was a way to sort of reach out sort of from afar, to look from a very obviously personal sort of point of view, and also somewhat like obviously privileged. But I still felt that maybe this gesture for me would help to sort of think of those things and still stay connected. I mean, especially that I have been away for much longer, for almost 6 years now. So that distance is much greater. And that was more or less where sort of I see the public-private overlap.
Well, in my case, it's just occurred like while seeing Salwa speaking that like the way we deal with public space, there's basically in Brazil there's not so much public space, but which is really bad. But on the other hand, there's no regulations much, so the street is much. The space of the street can very much be privatized in a bad or good way, or so like people like it's much more open to use in a sense. There's not so much regulation, so much easier to do things outside than in Europe or North America. And it just occurred to me that this is my third project in Berlin, and all of them were, even in the Botanian exhibition, it had half of it was happening outside of the gallery.
Oh, that's true. You did this subway station.
Yeah, I rented the vitrines there, and that for me was paramount. Like I really wanted to like open up the. So it's I'm sorry, it just made me conscious of that now with the question.
No, it's great. Maybe we can add an image later to our conversation so that they see, or maybe I made a picture from your from the publication that you shared. Of course.
Yeah. I think it has to do with this this thing in Brazil that we don't have very much public space. So so like the public sphere has to be like established or that I always like try to go out and like and negotiate with this. But on the other hand, I also think that what's interesting about this is like that, and that's something that maybe I may share with Salwa, that we don't have much institutions, we don't have much places that welcome art or take care of art, like especially contemporary art. So we have ourselves to create those networks. This idea of going out here in Berlin, it's like it's also an idea of going out of institutions, like opening up the work to these more precarious situations, like the image you share, like the people like looking for the work. It's in a way, yeah. The works are just in front of them, so it's as if we were operating under the radar. It's like this fragile, precarious. It seems very weak on one hand, but on the other hand, it's very subversive. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that I come from a very precarious, it is like, and it became more precarious in the past 5 years. So you have to find like strategies to put things like under the radar, or it's a little bit similar with practices from the 70s that also had to deal with censorship and that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I want to say in response to what you said, that at least for me, this is where I see my sort of, let's say, attraction to notions of like camouflaging or sort of emerging into an atmosphere, comes from this understanding, especially in a public context, comes from this understanding of sort of public spaces that become subverted and in a way converted through I mean, in a way, like you said, like, for example, that a lot of sort of different objects or things that are meant for something else are converted into benches, or become corners where people sit and have tea, and these kinds of things are also where I see placing work in public spaces to be a sort of part of this kind of ingenuous gestures of I don't know, at some point I made a work where I was looking at how roadblocks were used as benches, which seemed very contradictory because they were meant to push people away, but actually that there was this specific kind of I don't know, like energy to like, or ability to make the public space or force it into intimacy, while in certain moments is trying to actually do the opposite. And I think that these gestures are really important, and I find them quite like informing to how I think of art in public.
And it's almost like domestication of these public instruments that might have a negative purpose or some kind of oppressive purpose, and they're domesticized. And actually, one important thing also for Die Balkone was the fact that Prenzlauer Berg was former East Germany. And obviously when you look at the Eastern Europe, you can, to this X of North and South, you need to somehow add the East and the former East legacy.
That's true.
Of how public and private have been understood there, because also the public space was restricted. I mean, in theory it existed, there was public squares, but if you wanted to be a political subject, you would not go to the public squares, you would go to somebody's kitchen. Yeah, you would exactly do interventions like in other ways, like you do with your window application. So in some sense, you bring the world and the public to the private. So since I'm also coming from Eastern Europe, it's kind of important for me when one speaks about North and South to see what is the legacy of the public and the private in the East. And here we can also relate to it physically, because we operate in the district that used to be East Germany.
Yes, for sure. I think this is a kind of an important also connection, and that's also what I meant. Like when I think of also South to South conversation, I don't really like kind of think of it as a geographical like kind of pinpoint location, but it's kind of course it's much more of a maybe like kind of the precarious sensitivity that is a kind of developed living and working with these particular contexts, which of course in a way overlaps also overlaps with that experience of the artists in Eastern Germany finding their spaces, or like kind of finding their like kind of important critical conversations only through the domestic space, because of like the way public space was regulated and controlled in a very, let's say, in a very similar attitude to military coup d'etat periods, I would say. This is a really kind of really interesting overlap. Then when you see like those spaces in the way their public spaces controlled, and how there is a kind of a certain overlap that comes from that military coup d'etat, or like kind of military pressure, a certain pressure period, and also like the ideological pressure that happens also in East Germany. Joanna, would you like to also add to a few closing words?
Well, just to say that I took a lot from this conversation, but one thing that I guess stays with me is this idea of art as an anchor.
Yes.
And the notion of expanded locality. So somehow a little bit like this house, that we can kind of think of art as a tool to bring us somewhere, you know, or to make us, to situate us somewhere. And it doesn't matter that we were not born here and that we don't carry a legacy of a culture of that place. Somehow we can also reclaim our position and give back something to that place. And that's very beautiful, that art can be like a glue in helping this out together. So just wanted to thank you for those thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you both. It was a really, really beautiful and important conversation, and hope to see more collaborations between you, and hope that we can work more together also in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a nice day.